3 bone-chilling true stories, when dreams become nightmares at 3 a.m. Never told before. The clock struck 3. A bone-chilling hush fell over the town like a thick fog of dread. That hour, whispered about in hushed tones, was when nightmares blurred with reality, a realm where shadows danced and ghosts whispered secrets. Something about the witching hour was different, time stretched, and every creak of the floorboard sent shivers down the spine. That's when things got really weird. Sarah still felt the remnants of her dream, a vivid nightmare that left her breathless. The walls of her tiny bedroom flickered with shades of gray, nearly swallowing her whole as she laid frozen under her sheets, paralyzed by the eerie sensation of being watched. Outside her window, the trees swayed violently, branches clawing at the glass like skeletal fingers. She could swear she saw a figure lurking, a shadow that seemed stitched from the very fabric of darkness. Was she awake? Or trapped in a waking nightmare? Not far away, Paul heard it too, the whispers. They crawled under his skin, gnawing at him like rats in the night. He sat up in bed, eyes wide and heart racing, each beat echoing in his ears like a war drum. Friends warned him about 3 a.m. Legends spoke of shadows that crept into dreams, twisting them until they became something far more sinister. It was just his imagination, he told himself, but the jagged edges of fear held him captive. He gripped the blanket, trying to anchor himself in reality, yet his mind danced dangerously close to the abyss. He thought he was alone, but the creaking of the floorboards whispered secrets from the other side of the wall, where his neighbor claimed to experience vivid, ghostly encounters. Hunched in the corner, with tears staining her cheeks, she insisted they were out there waiting, something dark, something that thirsted for fear. Sleeping in his clothes, Paul never felt so vulnerable. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The night deepened, and Sarah's breathing quickened as the shadows thinned and twisted. Suddenly, a low growl echoed beneath her bed, vibrating through the floor like a warning. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever haunted her wasn't just part of her dream anymore. With shaky hands, she reached for her phone, eyes darting around the room, expecting to see those ghastly figures lurking in the corners. Fear struck hard as the screen lit up her surroundings, but nothing was there, yet the growl remained, intensifying like a wicked heartbeat. What dark force converged upon the town at this cursed hour? Would Sarah and Paul uncover the truth before it consumed them? And just how many others held secrets beneath their sleepy facades, waiting for 3 a.m. to spill their horrors? The clock was ticking. The growl grew more insistent, a low rumble that coiled around Sarah's heart and squeezed hard. It felt alive, like a creature testing the boundaries of her sanity. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to run, yet she found herself frozen, caught in a nightmare where every rational thought was stripped away. She took a shaky breath and swung her legs over the edge of the bed, heart hammering in her chest. The floor felt cold beneath her feet, almost like a shock of ice jolting through her nerves. The growl morphed into a deep, guttural snarl, causing her blood to run cold. Summoning what little courage remained, she glanced under the bed. Was it truly empty? Her breath caught as her eyes adjusted to the dim light streaming in. A pair of glowing eyes stared back, reflecting the light from her phone like small, predatory moons. Her heart sank, and for a fleeting moment, time stood still. She let out a strangled gasp, stumbling backward, tripping over her blanket and landing with a thud on the floor. Meanwhile, Paul was spiraling deeper into a dark ocean of dread. The whispers escalated around him, a rising tide of voices intertwining, their words indistinct yet haunting, a chorus of chaos. He felt the air thicken, pressing down on him like a weight. Each whisper seemed to snatch breath from his lungs. "Help me," one voice echoed, sharper than the others. It startled him, sending chills racing down his spine. "They're coming." Paul's limbs trembled, and he felt a pull toward the window, as though something outside beckoned him, calling out for his attention. He slid off his bed, every instinct warning him that to do so could invite danger. Yet the curiosity held tight. A thrill mixed with terror strangled his rational thoughts. As he approached the window, shadows flitted through the trees, slinking closer, wrapping around the trunks like serpents. A flash of movement caught his eye. He leaned closer. A figure stood just at the edge of the yard, dressed in tattered clothing, its face inclined to the ground. It was a woman, or maybe a girl. He couldn't tell. "Help! Please!" she shrieked, her voice raw and desperate, cutting through the haze of night. Paul's heart raced with urgency. Every sound around him faded as he focused on her. She looked up, revealing an expression of absolute anguish. "They're coming for you, for all of us." Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly, almost imperceptibly, yet the unmistakable vibration crawled up his spine as he realized it was no illusion. Something tangible was out there, something that wanted in. The shadows shifted, growing darker, swallowing the moonlight like a hungry abyss. In her room, Sarah scrabbled backward against the wall, her eyes wide in mounting panic. The eyes she'd seen under her bed vanished, replaced by sounds that echoed around her: scratches, dragging noises, like nails on a chalkboard, an open door to the basement creaking against the frame as if inviting her to discover what horrors lay below. The growl returned, deeper this time. A heavy silence fell, punctuated only by the rhythmic beating of her heart and the monstrous noises that escalated toward her ears. She knew she had to move, yet her body remained frozen in dread. In that moment, both Sarah and Paul were locked in a terrifying, shared fate, unaware that the witching hour was just beginning to unveil its ghastly intentions. Something dark had awakened, and it hungered for their fear and despair. What was real anymore, and what was simply a nightmare clinging to the edges of their minds? As the clock's ominous chime echoed through the night, the answer slipped ever closer, just beyond the shadows. But would they dare to confront it? Sarah's breathing quickened, each gasp louder than the last, punctuated by her pounding heart. The growl seemed to wrap around her like a cold embrace, slithering through the air with an unmistakable menace. Her gaze darted to the basement door, now ajar, shadows creeping through the gap, and the scratching sounds grew more deliberate, a rhythmic tap-tap-tap that echoed through the void. "Run, Sarah!" a voice whispered in her mind. But she was anchored in place, her body betraying her. Just when she thought she might scream, a sudden thought flickered through her panic. Paul. She had to find him. With a surge of adrenaline, she sprang to her feet whispering across the floor as she hurried toward the door. The moment she reached the hallway, the growl deepened into a chilling snarl that sent a jolt through her. It was warning her, threatening her, but she pushed herself to move. Meanwhile, Paul was wrestling with his own demons. The girl at the window, wild-eyed and frantically pleading with him, became an inexorable echo inside his mind. "They're coming for you!" she screamed again, but before he could respond, a deafening crash from downstairs shook the house, stealing the breath from his lungs. He hesitated, uncertainty grappling at the edges of his resolve. Yet, something in the air had shifted, as if a wall had dissolved around him. The whispers, once comforting, turned sinister and mocking. "You can't hide your loss," they taunted, clawing at his sanity. In that moment, Paul shot towards the door. Every ounce of fear urged him on, forcing him to realize he wasn't in this alone. He needed to find Sarah, they needed to escape together. Running down the staircase 2 steps at a time, he felt the cool air wrap around him, laced with an unsettling scent, a sweet, metallic tang that made his stomach twist. As Sarah emerged from the hallway, she gasped at the sight of Paul. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. The air thickened, a crackling tension building between them. The growl had morphed into something almost human, a voice both plaintive and mocking echoing in the corners of the house. Together at last it crooned. Did you hear that? She whispered, eyes wide. Paul nodded, fear etched into his features. We need to go. Now. They tore through the front door, only to find the yard transformed. The trees twisted into distorted shapes, grotesque and alive, like twisted fingers reaching toward them. The shadows were deeper, almost pooling against the ground like dark ink. Panic surged through Paul as he grabbed Sarah's hand, yanking her towards the gate. But as they ran, the ground shifted beneath their feet, vines and roots erupting like serpents, wrapping around their ankles, pulling them back toward the house. It's not letting us leave. Sarah shrieked, struggling against the grasp. Fight it. Paul shouted, desperately. We can't let it take us. In a surge of energy, they both yanked hard, breaking free for a moment. But the growls sang louder now, surrounding them, drowning out everything else. And suddenly, the figure from the window reappeared behind them, a haunting apparition wreathed in shadows. You've meddled in things you don't understand, she intoned, her voice echoing across the scarred yard. Time froze as realization crashed over them. The house was alive, and they were its prey. What secrets lay in the corners of the darkened house? What was the true nature of the evil trying to consume them? As they braced themselves against the rising tide of terror, they heard the soft creaking of the doors behind them, slowly opening back into the abyss. Would they step back inside one last time, or dare to face whatever waited in the depths of the night? The shadows whispered louder now, a cacophony of voices dripping with malice. Paul and Sarah stood paralyzed, caught in the eerie glow of moonlight filtering through the trees. It felt like the ground itself was breathing, a slow, slithering pulse that matched the frantic rhythm of their hearts. Paul, we can't stay out here, Sarah's voice trembled, a small spark of panic igniting her words. The apparition loomed closer, hunger shimmering in her empty gaze, the twisted shadows wrapping around her like a cloak. We have to make it to the road. The streetlight. If we can get there, we can call for help. I won't let it take us, Paul said, determination anchoring him even as dread coiled in his stomach. With one last desperate glance at the haunted yard, they charged forward, ripping free from the clutches of the grotesque roots. Every step felt like a victory against the malevolent force, but the growl intensified, a thunder that shook them to the core. As they sprinted, a blinding light flickered in the distance. There. The street light. Sarah's eyes sparked with relief for the briefest second before a thick mist rolled in, engulfing them. The air turned icy, and the world around them warped, a funhouse mirror of reality twisted into a living nightmare. Keep moving. Paul shouted, clawing through the fog. But the mist thickened, wrapping around their limbs like invisible chains. Shadows danced on the periphery, whispering secrets meant only for the lost. Help us! Sarah cried, a plea swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The trees creaked, their gnarled branches twisting and reaching, clawing at the sky as if trying to break free. Then, amidst the fog, figures emerged, fleeting glimpses of despairing souls, trapped in the same inferno. Faces contorted in agony. Their mouths moved, but only silence fell on the scene. Don't look at them. Paul urged, pulling Sarah close. They want to drag us down with them. Paul, how are we going to get out? Her voice quivered. She could feel the pull of the apparitions tugging at her sanity, dimming the light of her spirit. As the mist threatened to consume them entirely, Sarah grasped Paul's arm tighter. We need to confront it, whatever it is, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. It thrives on fear. If we face it, we can break free. Paul's heart raced. A battle loomed before them, an ultimate confrontation against the dark heart of the entity that had ensnared them. Together, he said, steeling his resolve, though a tremor laced his voice. Taking a deep breath, they turned toward the whispering shadows. The growl morphed into a wicked chuckle, reverberating through the mist. You think you can escape? You are mine now. With the weight of desperation behind them, they stood firm. No. We won. Be yours. Sarah shouted, her voice rising above the din. The mist wavered, and in that moment, they saw a flicker of its true form, a lump of darkness, amorphous and seething with malice, swelling in pulsating waves. A creature birthed from fear, thriving on despair. Now! Paul shouted, an inexplicable fury fueling his resolve. They ran toward it, defiance raging in their hearts. As they clashed against the black torrent, a brilliant light erupted from them, a surge of hope pushing back against the darkness. A deafening roar of protest echoed, shattering the silence of the night. The shadows recoiled, and for a fleeting moment, clarity flickered in the air around them. Would their hope and unity be enough to drive back the dark tide? Or would they succumb to the horror, where shadows ruled and the screams of those lost echoed for eternity? The battle was far from over, and as the creature writhed, Paul and Sarah felt the boundary between light and dark begin to crack, revealing a hidden path. But they still had to decide, would they go deeper into the abyss or take the chance to fight for the light? The choices loomed heavy, threatening to consume them, waiting for the next moment to unfold. The pulse of the ground beneath them intensified, matching the chaos in their minds. Paul and Sarah exchanged desperate glances, their breath clouding in the biting cold air. The light they had ignited flickered like a fragile candle in a storm, but it felt like their only chance. Which way? Paul fumbled, squinting through the shrouded mist, searching for the way forward. The path was a swirling chaos of shadows, and every second felt like a lifetime. There. Sarah pointed toward a faint glimmer just beyond the blackness. It was barely a shimmer, but it was something. Hope clung to it like a lifeline. We have to move, now. With renewed determination, they forced their way through the cold mist, the intensity of the growls rising again, a cacophony of rage and hunger that clawed at their senses. Shadows lunged at them, tendrils of dark energy wrapping around their ankles, trying to drag them away. Run! Paul yelled, feeling the weight of the shadows' desperation draping over him like a suffocating blanket. They surged ahead, knees aching, hearts pounding, pushing against the dark that threatened to swallow them whole. The light grew closer, shimmering like a beacon through a vast ocean of despair. Don't look back! Sarah cried, her voice a raw edge of panic. Paul could feel her terror mix with his, a potent fuel for their flight. Each stride pushed against the dread sinking into the pit of his stomach. Then, just as they were nearing the light, the mist exploded around them. A figure emerged, larger than life, eyes blazing with hollow fire. It was the form of the dark creature, monstrous, grotesque, a living embodiment of every fear they had ever known. You think you can awaken the light? It shrieked, laughter echoing against their resolve, laced with malice that chilled Paul to his bones. You belong to the shadows now. Never. Paul spat back, his stance firming despite the crushing fear. They had tasted hope, and that was worth fighting for. In that instant, the light behind them flared, igniting like a supernova. An energy surged between Paul and Sarah, binding them together, transcending the mist and darkness attempting to separate them. We are more than your nightmares. They shouted in unison. As if in response, the creature's form faltered. It shrieked, a sound so filled with rage and pain that it made the air tremble. With every step they took toward the light, Sarah remembered something deeper, a name called forth from the recesses of her mind. Paul, think of our strength. Remember why we're here. And as they charged, something remarkable happened. Their memories ignited into a blinding light, the laughter shared, the dreams they had woven together. It felt like a surge of every joyful moment they had ever captured, rippling against the darkness with splendor. No! The creature wailed, convulsing, shadowy tendrils swirling around it in a frenzy. This cannot be. I want to let you take us down. Sarah shouted, voice rising above the chaos. Each word became a sword against the darkness. They laughed, they cried, and with the last ounce of their strength, they leaped forward, plunging into the heart of the light. It enveloped them, pulling them free from the jaws of despair, blinding the creature with a purity that echoed hope. As the darkness writhed around them, Paul felt the shifting tide of fear draw back. But as the mist began to fade, he realized they were not out of danger yet. Air rushed back into their lungs, but the ground trembled beneath them, cracking like ice underfoot. "Paul? What have we done?" Sarah gasped, her voice laced with disbelief as they landed on solid ground. But as they looked back, the mist morphed again, revealing the truth. The creature now stood divided, but not defeated. Its eyes glimmered with a new hunger, one that held the promise of even darker shadows to come, and just like that, what they thought was an escape revealed deeper horrors yet to unfold. What would it take to finally rid themselves of this nightmare? The creature's laughter echoed ominously, chilling them to the core. With dread clawing at their hearts, Paul and Sarah understood that the battle was only just beginning. "We have to find a way to destroy it." Paul's voice was urgent. But could they truly face the darkness again, now that it wore a new and twisted face? The question hung heavy in the air, as shadows began to stir once more. The earth beneath them split further, jagged fissures racing like lightning through the ground. Trees around them groaned ominously, their branches twisting as if in agony. Sarah grabbed Paul's arm, pulling him closer. "What do we do?" she breathed, fear tightening her throat. The creature loomed larger than before, its form shifting, distant echoes of all their nightmares soaking into its very being. "You cannot escape me," it boomed, voice a throaty thunder. "You and your memories are my sustenance. I will feast on your fear until you are nothing but shadows yourselves." Paul felt every hair on his body stand on end. "We can't let it win, Sarah," he insisted, though his pulse was racing. "Remember the light, it's our weapon." "But look at it!" Sarah yelled, pointing a trembling finger. The creature, those hollow eyes now glowing with malicious delight, began to gather the shadows swirling around. The air crackled, and the mist thickened. "It feeds off our fear," Paul shouted, grasping for a plan. "If we can stay strong, if we can hold on to that light." The creature's laughter echoed again, this time more menacing, as it collapsed the distance between them. "Foolish children," it rasped. "Your hope will rot away." As the shadows surged forward, Paul felt the desperation rise within him. "Sarah! Hold my hand." He took her cold fingers in his own. Together, they anchored their focus on the memories, the summer nights spent under a starlit sky, the laughter shared, the moments that wove them together. The light within them flickered and flared anew, brightening their surroundings and pushing back against the darkness for just a moment. Paul could see it, the shimmering thread of power connecting them, glowing fiercely against the cold void. "Together. Remember who we are." The creature howled, a sound so chilling it seared through Paul's resolve. But he tightened his grip on Sarah's hand, feeling her courage surge through him. "We cannot be broken," he shouted, his voice fierce and unyielding. Suddenly, shadows erupted from the ground like a tidal wave, slashing toward them. Paul felt the stinging thrums as the darkness clawed at his skin, but he refused to let go. Every fiber in his being screamed with pain and fear, but he drew strength from the warmth of Sarah beside him. "Seal your heart. Do not give in," he urged, forcing the words out even as terror threatened to swallow him whole. In a moment of stillness, as the shadows hesitated, Paul locked eyes with Sarah. "On 3, he said, his breath hitching. 1, 2, 3. They pushed the light forward, a dazzling column cutting through the chaos. The creature recoiled, screams mingling with crackling energy, retreating momentarily under the blinding purity they radiated. "Keep pushing," Sarah cried, her face alight with fierce determination. The shadows began to dissolve, crackling like dry leaves in a fire, as light forced its way into the deepest pits of darkness surrounding them. But just as hope surged in their hearts, a crashing sound echoed, and the ground surged again underneath their feet, throwing them off balance. Paul stumbled, and Sarah screamed as a massive shadow lunged toward them with inhuman speed, its claws outstretched. "Sarah!" he yelled, fear clawing at his throat as he reached for her just as she was pulled back. Pain shot through him as he felt their connection waver, the light flickering like a dying star. The creature surged forward, reshoots of tendrils grasping toward them. No! Paul shouted, adrenaline like fire coursing through him. He couldn't lose her. As darkness pressed in, their surroundings faded into a swirling void. Bellows and howls echoed, piercing through the shadows like a cacophony of countless voices, causing Paul's heart to pound louder with each beat. Suddenly, a silhouette emerged from the darkness, and Paul felt a flicker of hope. Is it? But before he could finish his thought, another growl resonated in the air, deeper and more menacing than the last. What other horrors lay lurking in the void? With Sarah in danger and shadows closing in, the only thing on Paul's mind was survival. Where would they find refuge in this swirling chaos? The dread seized him, and they needed to act fast, before time ran out. The shadows swallowed them, a dark vortex that twisted around Paul, suffocating him. He fought to breathe, straining against the weight of despair closing in. Every instinct told him to run, to escape, and yet, he couldn't abandon Sarah to whatever horrors lurked in this realm. Sarah! His voice broke. Panic surged through his veins, desperation igniting as he pushed against the tide of darkness. But the void held him firmly, a primordial force that seemed to relish in their fear. Just when Paul thought he would be consumed, he felt a pulse of warmth beneath the shadows. The faint glimmer of their light flared again, rooted deep in his memory. Focus, Paul. He whispered to himself, each word a lifeline. She needs you, we need each other. He forced his eyes to search through the dark. Ahead, dim outlines flickered in the haze. Memories, he realized. Framed by shadow, snapshots of their happiest days glimmered like stars erupting in an endless night. Each one flickered momentarily, each one a spark of resistance. Concentrate! Paul shouted, the urgency echoing in the void. It's in us, it can't take what we refuse to give. He felt the memory of Sarah's laughter wash over him, a sound brighter than the fiercest light. The way her eyes sparkled under the summer sun returned to him like a beacon. He held on to it, refusing to let the creature snatch away what was theirs. Together! He yelled again, willing the shadows to retreat. We're more than what you've consumed. The light erupted from him, rushing out with a fierce, righteous fervor. A blinding wave surged toward the looming creature, which shrieked a sound of fury mixed with pure terror. The silhouettes twisted violently, struggling to escape the illumination, but then something shifted. The ground beneath them jolted once more, splitting open with a crack that rumbled like thunder. A chasm gaped wide, darkness surging from its depths like a monstrous mouth eager to swallow them. Paul grabbed at the burning light surrounding them, trying to tether it to Sarah, who struggled against the pull of the abyss. No! He screamed, lunging forward to catch her wrist just as the shadows gripped her. Her eyes widened, reflecting fear and determination, as she fought against the encroaching darkness. Paul! Hold on! Her voice pierced through the chaos, but the ground shuddered violently, shaking them apart. Her other hand reached for him, but it was slipping. A surge of raw instinct propelled Paul, adrenaline rushing through him. He felt the connection between them still strong despite the engulfing shadows. He could do this. Grab my hand! He shouted, heart pounding, as tendrils writhed at her feet. He summoned all his memories, the shared nights, each victory, and whispered dreams. Their stories could withstand the horror closing in. Out of the murk, their luminous memories flickered stronger, weaving a shield of light around them. I won't let go. Sarah screamed, and with that affirmation, she yanked her hand away from the darkness, channeling her own light. The combined force surged forward, illuminating the shadows with radiant energy that pulsed almost like a heartbeat, but as the creature recoiled, something unexpected happened. A piercing scream erupted from the depths of the chasm, a voice that was both familiar and foreign. You cannot defy me. You have only begun to understand what I will take from you. Paul's gut twisted as realization dawned. Is that? He hesitated. The figure emerging from the shadows bore a haunting resemblance to someone he once knew, someone who had been lost. An internal battle raged within him, as memories both tender and painful began to unravel in the air. Before he could process this revelation, the ground bucked again, and an unfathomable darkness swept over them. "Sarah!" he bellowed, the name echoing in the cataclysm that surrounded them. In the darkness, Paul felt the faint tether of their hope beginning to fray. Would they succumb to the shadows, or would they uncover the truth lying deeply entwined in the gloom? Only one thing was clear: the true horror was just beginning. The shadows laughed a low, rumbling cackle that vibrated through Paul's bones. A chill crept across his skin, and the weight of the dark pressed down like a leaden mantle. He was suffocating, and yet, his eyes remained locked on Sarah, who struggled against the darkness. Her strength was faltering, and that reality clawed at him, igniting terror he thought he would never feel again. "Fight, Sarah!" he urged, desperation clawing at his voice. "Don't give up. We can break free." The creature, woven from darkness and despair, lurked just beyond the haze, its form shifting and flickering like a bad dream that refused to fade. Bioluminescent in its horridness, it twisted in the shadows, a grotesque mockery of what they had been and what they might still be. Each ounce of strength Paul had was now tethered to Sarah. As she leaned closer, reaching out with an unwavering spark in her eyes, the shadows around them roared, threatening to drown out their hope. With every heartbeat, the chasm beneath them gaped wider, hungry for the warmth of their light. "Paul! I can feel it pulling me!" she shouted, and the panic in her voice threatened to unravel him still further. "Stay with me!" Paul screamed, gripping her wrist tighter, his heart racing wildly. Together, they turned towards the wall of darkness where the creature loomed, now more defined, a shape that resembled Paul's old friend, Michael, whose absence had carved a void in his life long ago. His face flickered in and out of clarity, just enough to ignite the deepest of Paul's sorrows, entwining guilt with rage. "Michael?" he breathed, the name catching in his throat. "Join me, Paul," the shadowed figure chanted, its voice a dreadful mix of longing and malice. "You know the truth, you can't save her. I can show you the freedom of the void, of freedom she will never understand." Anguish pierced through Paul's mind, a mix of nostalgia and betrayal. He could not abandon Sarah. The love they shared was infinitely more powerful than the twisted echoes of his past. "You're not Michael. You can't have her!" Paul roared, pulling Sarah closer, feeling her warmth seep into him, but the grip of the darkness loosened and tightened again, threatening to drag Sarah below where it could feast on her essence. "Let go!" the creature pleaded, mimicking Michael's voice but drenched in poison. "Imagine the power, the peace. Release her, Paul." "No!" Paul yelled, a surge of defiance crashing through him, coursing like lightning through his veins. The memories flooded back, the laughter echoing against the stony faces of despair. "Remember, Sarah," he urged, straining against the pull of the shadows. "Remember us, those nights under starry skies. The dreams we shared. You have to fight this." Suddenly, through the suffocating dark, a glimmer sparked in Sarah's eyes, igniting something ancient within her. "You don't control me," she shouted, her voice soft yet resolute, the tremor beneath it a blade of light cutting through. "You have no power here." With a rallying cry, Sarah drew upon the core of her being, a reservoir of memories, of love and laughter, and thrust it outward defiantly. The light erupted anew, tearing through the shadows like the dawn breaking after the longest night. The creature recoiled, its form flickering violently, and with an ear-piercing wail, it surged deep into the chasm that roared beneath them. In that moment, for a heartbeat, the pressure eased, but then the ground quaked violently once more, shattering the fragile peace. "Hold on!" Paul shouted, clutching Sarah as the abyss threatened to swallow them both. A jagged piece of stone jutted from the edge, shuddering like the heartbeat of some great beast. "We need to jump!" Sarah cried, determination igniting the air around them. But the shadows were not done. They twisted and surged angrily as if sensing their attempt to escape. It seemed a monstrous finale was close at hand, a reckoning that would demand everything from them. "Ready?" she asked desperately. "On three." Panic threaded through Paul's voice, but there was a spark. Perhaps their fight had just begun. 1. 2. As they prepared to leap into the unknown, the shadows roared, and the ground exploded in a frenzy of light and darkness, a maelstrom of forgotten fears tangled with unabashed hope. 3. But would they transcend the void, or plunge deeper into its bitter grasp? The darkness whispered promises of despair, echoing back through time. Only momentarily could he cling to hope as another figure began to emerge from the shadows, one whose identity would unravel the very fabric of their fight. What are we truly up against? Paul thought, feeling a chill run up his spine as they teetered on the precipice of an unknowable fate. As they leaped, time fractured around Paul and Sarah. The world around them twisted into blurs of light and shadow. For a moment, their minds suspended in a pregnant silence, the pressures of the void turned to a weightlessness that felt surreal. Then, with a thunderous clap, they hit the cold, hard ground below. Pain lanced through Paul's body, splintering his senses. He groaned, struggling to push himself up. Where was Sarah? The air felt different, thinner, almost electric. He scanned the immediate area. Shadows slithered across the ground, creeping toward him, whispering promises laced with malice. They were in a different realm, a twisted mirror of their own, echoing dark versions of reality. "Sarah!" he called, his voice trembling. He tried to stand but stumbled, knees buckling beneath him. Gritting his teeth, he aimed to break through the fog settling around him. Suddenly, a bright flash lit the space. Sarah emerged from the darkness, her expression fierce yet bewildered. "Paul!" she shouted, urgency thick in her voice. "We have to keep moving." He nodded, reeling at how quickly fear had morphed into a need to protect. They pushed on, shadows stretching like claws, swiping at their heels. The air pulsed, suffocating him with memories from the past, full of friendships that should be endured, laughter that should be echoed endlessly. Each step felt like wading through thick mud, memories fighting to drag him back. Michael's voice, intertwined with those haunting whispers. It had to be a trick, but doubt gnawed at him. "Do you think it's over?" he asked Sarah, panting heavily. "It can never be over if we don't stand strong," she responded, determination shining through her exhaustion. Yet even her voice wavered, he could see it, fear flickering behind her brave facade. Every shadow seemed to soak up their vulnerability, morphing it into dark mockery, and then they halted. Paul's heart sank. They stood before a towering wall, blacker than night. Murmurs swirled around them, taunting and echoing with familiar laughter. His heart thudded, each beat punctuated by realization. This wall was not just a barrier, it was a mirror reflecting their deepest fears and regrets. "Sarah," Paul whispered, memories flooding back, adventures, laughter, an inseparable bond with her. But then Michael's shadow loomed within. "We can't let it take us again." A quick glance at Sarah showed him that she was wrestling with the same ghosts. The shadowy figures formed shapes behind the wall, dreams and faces once cherished turned grotesque, whispering secrets only he could hear. "Don't listen," Sarah shouted, straining against the air thick with sorrow. "Remember who we are. Together, we're unstoppable." But weakness brewed within Paul's chest, wrestling between reality and the seductive call of the darkness. "What if we're fighting a losing battle?" he murmured, desperation creeping into his voice. Sarah opened her mouth to retort, but a deafening roar erupted from beyond the wall. The choking darkness began to part, revealing not just creatures made of sorrow but the twisted forms of those they had loved and lost. The familiar sounds of laughter grotesquely contorted into mocking shrieks. "Join us!" they wailed, their voices mingling into an unbearable cacophony. "Sarah! Don't give in!" Paul shouted, grounding himself by clutching her wrist. But deep down, he felt an insidious pull, a surrender to doubts. How could they fight against their own pasts? A sudden thought ignited his resolve. What if we embrace it? Paul suggested, a spark of defiance pushing through as he steadied his breathing. What if we transform our pain into fuel? Sarah's eyes flickered, an understanding dawning upon her like the first light of dawn. Yes. Let our memories be our strength. Together, they turned to face the wall, ready to reclaim what those shadows had stolen. A shimmering light began to break through them, illuminating their shared hope like a beacon. But just as they prepared to channel that luminous power, a deafening silence fell. Then came a voice, icy as winter, whispering, "You think you can win against yourselves?" Paul's chest tightened as the shadows morphed into yet another figure, one he never expected to see. "You've failed once, you'll fail again," it hissed, revealing the sharp edges of despair lurking within its words. Who are you?" Paul stammered, dread pooling in his stomach as the figure stepped forward, its presence unraveling the very fabric of their fight, and in that moment, they realized they had yet to confront the darkest secret hidden within, the truth threatening to tear them apart. Would they overcome this final test, or would they succumb to the very darkness they sought to escape? The air shimmered with uncertainty, thick with the rawness of their fears. Paul and Sarah stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the oncoming figure that loomed like a specter from their past. Michael's shadow, a twisted fragment of his essence, leering with malevolent glee. "Look at you two, fighting against shadows of what you've lost," it taunted, its voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can escape your memories? I am your regret. I am your pain." Paul's heart raced, each beat an echo of the memories shared with Michael, ones that should have been filled with warmth. The brotherhood turned bitter. "You're not him," he shouted, defiance pushing back against the flood of despair threatening to drown him. "You're just a part of what we've been through, nothing more." "Foolish boy," the figure hissed, "you and Sarah are nothing but echoes of lost dreams. You've forgotten what you truly are. Alone in the dark, you'll always return to me." The shadows around them writhed, swirling like a storm, feeding on the uncertainty in Paul's chest. Each word was like ice, breaking through the fragile armor he'd built around his heart. But then Sarah stepped forward, defiant and fierce. "We're not afraid of you," she cried, her voice cutting through the darkness like a knife. "We're not alone. We are each other's light." As if her words were a catalyst, a burning warmth surged between Paul and Sarah, igniting their resolve. Memories flooded back, the laughter, the dreams, a bond unbroken even by fear. Paul could feel his heart pounding in rhythm with Sarah's, as if they were creating a force strong enough to battle the very shadows warping around them. "Remember, Paul," Sarah implored, the connection electrifying the air between them. "Remember the good times, the nights filled with laughter. We're standing together. That's our power." "Yes," Paul shouted, feeling hope swell higher than ever. "We embrace our past, but we choose to rise." With fists clenched and hearts racing, they felt the memories surge forward, glowing like luminescent stars against the nightmares threatening to engulf them. "Light!" they exclaimed together, and it burst forth, pushing against the grip of darkness, sending shockwaves through the twisted figure of Michael. The creature shrieked, its form beginning to fracture under the weight of their combined light. In that moment, it was like dawn breaking through the longest night. The warmth that filled their souls was ignited by love, by shared smiles, and promises unbroken. The shadows recoiled, the fear that had held them captive began to unravel with each step of defiance they took. "Get away from us!" they screamed, a shared battle cry that pulsed with raw energy. The bright, radiant force rippled outward, dissolving the sorrow and hatred woven into the shadows. Faces of loved ones shone brightly, each laugh a weapon against despair. But darkness fought fiercely, a wild tempest that twisted around them, clawing for a chance to return. "You cannot win, not against your own shadows." The creature howled, the barbed edges of its voice like daggers cutting through the air. "You're wrong," Sarah shouted back, her voice echoing with certainty. "These shadows are part of us, yes. But they cannot define us. We are stronger together, and we choose to walk towards the light. With that final declaration, they charged forward, entwined in elemental power, their hopes and dreams igniting the universe around them. Bursting forth from the abyssal grip of despair, a brilliant light poured from their hands, merging into a stream of incandescent brilliance. The shadows writhed in response, their tendrils clawing helplessly at the frame of unity trying to break through. The ground beneath them trembled as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart, threatening to collapse under the weight of their truth. The air crackled with energy, swelling until it erupted in a blinding flash that enveloped everything, then silence, a deafening, profound silence stretched around them, as both light and shadow dissipated into the ether, like smoke escaping the grasp of a flame. As the dust settled, Paul blinked against the brightness. The cold presence of dread was gone, replaced instead by a rich warmth enveloping them. He looked around, breathless. It was morning, the sun rising above the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. A new day filled with possibilities stretched before them. Did we? Sarah breathed, her wide eyes searching the horizon. We did, Paul replied, feeling tears brim in his eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief. They had conquered the nightmare, had turned dreams into reality. Whatever darkness lay behind them would no longer chain them. They had chosen their own path, forged by light and resilience. As they stood together, hand in hand, they knew their journey wasn't over. But they would face whatever came next together. And so, they turned toward the sun, allowing its warmth to wash over them, filling the fragmented spaces of their souls, ready for a new beginning. Now, before we close this chapter, I need you to do something crucial. You have to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Your support is what keeps this community alive. This is the moment to show it. Smash that like button now. Let us feed the algorithm and let it know how much you're loving this journey, and I want to hear from every single one of you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. What do you think happens next? Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.